having problems setting it
I
up.
was having trouble with the link, but I have one from chemistry class with you through it, and then put the code into my phone. Like you have the account separate, and then put the code in.
Okay. Yeah, I'll message Mr. Roach and see like if you got any workarounds for us on that. It seemed like it should have been straightforward. Technology. I hate doing that. It's like
Oh shit.
awkward thing. You're like, do I still do this? Like. Yeah.
How do I connect to the Wi-Fi?
Great question. It should just be your like student login, so like your student username and password. I think. Jordan, is that right? To connect to Wi-Fi, it's just the school username and the password?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to use a VPN.
Pardon?
You have to use a VPN.
Oh, really? Should have 10 folks in here.
Who? I think one of them was Calvin. His name is Battlefield Tryhard.
You got enough? So you're not gonna like go over anything?
So how do I change slides?
She changed them. I changed them.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so just hold on a second while we wait to get started. The code is GNSVXK. So basically today is all about just like wrapping our brains around this idea of being able to mislead people with graphs. So our first run through these graphs, all you want to do is jot down like your first impression. So they're gonna pop up on the screen, and what comes to mind by looking at them.
Where do we write it?
You're gonna be actually like right on your phone. So our first graph is this one here. More students are earning their high school diplomas than ever before, based on this chart.
What idea?
First, did it let you in? Right? It's jointv.com. Okay, so yeah, that's it. It seems wrong. It's colorful. Oh. More kids are in school. Kids are getting smarter. We're just gonna run through these. Again, I apologize. I did try to look for Canadian content, but it was really hard to find. So I'm dealing largely with American content today. First impression, just by looking at it. Did it work?
Huh? Yeah.
Does an ad operate? Lots of color and big text. Maybe a pie graph. The fact we see all this kind of information represented, these like different media outlets. Each adds up to more than 100%. The percentages kind of seem off. Agree. I'm not quite sure where these numbers are coming from.
I'm at the M&M.
On the whole, that looks
What? Disabled chat. What the fuck?
that make it a little easier to see. Or just make some comments on the
Why?
I'm with you on that one. I'm so tired. I don't know why, but February just has been one heck of a month already for sleeping. Not good. The graph is wrong. Numbers are out of whack.
So much money, damn it. I forgot to count.
Yeah, we've left up December here. Graph is wrong. Okay, second last one. And then we'll talk about kind of how we can tell.
What the hell are these people?
So this is the top 5 counties with the greatest number of confirmed COVID cases. This is back end of April, beginning of May. So the kind of like purpley color is Cobb County, teal is DeKalb, yellow is Fulton. I can't even read what the orange one is. I think the blue one is Hall. What do you notice? What do you see? What does it make you think? COVID isn't good. I agree. It sucks. mark on this pen. This is just a way to do it. So show it. Yeah, definitely. Okay, what else do we have? People are being responsible to the treatment down. Lots of color. Seeing the timeline. The timeline is hidden underneath here when I like converted it to covered it up. I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but let me get to that part. Take that down. The bar graph. It is. More color and okay. Next one. So this one is interesting. So it's showing red is abortions and pink is cancer screenings and prevention services. I'm not showing you this graph to influence opinions. I'm just showing it to you because it is a graph that was out there and used for something.
No. Good.
Worst graph you've ever seen. Cancer screening would be looking for people who have potential symptoms for cancer, and so they are testing them. So even looking at people like males over the age of 40 are supposed to be getting routinely tested for prostate cancer. And within, I think it's every 3 years, are supposed to be getting tested for cervical cancer. Fun stuff, animals. Abortions are going up. Cancer screening is going down. Not even really a graph. Okay. So while we are thinking about that, we are going to try and spot the misleading graph, but first let's figure out how to do that. So.
This isn't just supplies, it's a masterpiece. It's where did you buy that? Or why did you make that? A toothpaste brand claims their product will destroy more plaque than any product ever made. A politician tells you their plan will create the most jobs. We're so used to hearing these kinds of exaggerations in advertising and politics that we might not even bat an eye. But what about when the claim is accompanied by a graph? After all, a graph isn't an opinion. It represents cold, hard numbers, and who can argue with those? Yet, as it turns out, there are plenty of ways graphs can mislead and outright manipulate. Here are some things to look out for. In this 1992 ad, Chevy claimed to make the most reliable trucks in America using this graph. Not only does it show that 98% of all Chevy trucks sold in the last 10 years are still on the road, but it looks like they're twice as dependable as Toyota trucks. That is, until you take a closer look at the numbers on the left and see that the figure for Toyota is about 96.5%. The scale only goes between 95 and 100%. If it went from 0 to 100, it would look like this. This is one of the most common ways graphs misrepresent data, by distorting the scale. Zooming in on a small portion of the y-axis exaggerates a barely detectable difference between the things being compared. And it's especially misleading with bar graphs, since we assume the difference in the size of the bars is proportional to the values. But the scale can also be distorted along the x-axis, usually in line graphs showing something changing over time. This chart showing the rise in American unemployment from 2008 to 2010 manipulates the x-axis in two ways. First of all, the scale is inconsistent, compressing the 15-month span after March 2009 to look shorter than the preceding 6 months. Using more consistent data points gives a different picture, with job losses tapering off by the end of 2009. And if you wonder why they were increasing in the first place, the timeline starts immediately after the U.S.'s biggest financial collapse since the Great Depression. These techniques are known as cherry picking. A time range can be carefully chosen to exclude the impact of a major event right outside it. And picking specific data points can hide important changes in between. Even when there's nothing wrong with the graph itself, leaving out relevant data can give a misleading impression. This chart of how many people watch the Super Bowl each year makes it look like the event's popularity is exploding. But it's not accounting for population growth. The ratings have actually held steady because while the number of football fans has increased, their share of overall viewership has not. Finally, a graph can't tell you much if you don't know the full significance of what's being presented. Both of the following graphs use the same ocean temperature data from the National Centers for Environmental Information. So why do they seem to give opposite impressions? The first graph plots the average annual ocean temperature from 1880 to 2016, making the change look insignificant. But in fact, a rise of even half a degree Celsius can cause massive ecological disruption. This is why the second graph, which shows the average temperature variation each year, is far more significant. When they're used well, graphs can help us intuitively grasp complex data. But as visual software has enabled more usage of graphs throughout all media, it's also made them easier to use in a careless or dishonest way. So the next time you see a graph, don't be swayed by the lines and curves. Look at the labels, the numbers, the scale, and the context, and ask what story the picture is trying to tell.
Okay, so if you grab your notes package that I handed out, that's kind of what we'll look at for a second here. So, notes package. This is our booklet for our whole unit. Make sure your name is on the front because they look the same for everyone until we start filling them in. And even then, just make sure if you ever leave it behind anywhere, you can get it back. On the inside cover is a table of contents. It tells you exactly all the lessons that we'll be doing in order. They are labeled lesson numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, blah, blah. So if you are ever missing a day, you'll know what we're doing in class. Okay? In addition to looking there, you can always look in our OneNote as well, and the unit outline is listed there, what's done in class and what the independent work is. Okay? So if we ever miss anything, that's where you can check. I know you have to leave right, so just bear with me for a couple seconds, okay? So the next page is our unit dictionary. You can use this at your leisure. I've got some definitions up here for just getting us started. Bias is the one that I really want to emphasize because that's the one that we really need to kind of keep in mind throughout this unit. Bias is our tendency to portray information the way we see it, using our perspective and our slant to show information. So actually, if you're in Mr. Newton's history class, he's talking about different media that use bias and kind of like satirical slant on the same information that you would see in normal news. So I think my favorite article from The Onion that I remember seeing was one about how children, all they want to do is play, and so they almost have ADD. It was this big one that's clearly not actually true because all tiny children want to play. So bias is just the opinion or perspective that is unsuspected. And that's what's going to lead us to make misleading graphs. Our x-axis is that horizontal piece. Y-axis is our vertical line and our vertical labels on the graph. Okay. And then scale is actually how we spread things out on those axes. Actually, notes for today aren't really anything to write down. They're all taken in the video. Okay? So you're not using anything right now. You are. So you can kind of peer through this, and then your homework is there's 4 different graphs. You're gonna look for these kind of details and how these graphs are being manipulated so that it kind of takes you from one thing or another. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's all laid out there. You can rewatch the video. That's what the QR code for. Okay. And then there's a skill check in Teams, and you want to find one misleading graph on the internet and just drop it into our window. All right, so we've got our definitions. If you go to the next page, I was feeling generous when I made this notes package, and I don't have you actually writing down any of these characteristics. I typed them all for you. So you're welcome. So there are some key ways that we can create misleading graphs. So that's what's outlined on page 4. Okay, so you can cherry pick, like we mentioned in the video. So that can be zooming in or zooming out, using those inconsistent scales on your axes, or excluding information, looking at things like cutting out certain dates or cutting out specific values anywhere. That's our first way. And it's the most common way that we can manipulate graphs. Sure. Okay, so that's number 1. 1 of 5. Number 2 is the type of graph that you use. So sometimes people choose inappropriate graphs. So when we go through those same graphs again, have a good one, guys. See you on Friday. Then we can kind of talk about, like, some graphs are more appropriate than others depending on the type of information that you're dealing with. So we're going to talk more about that in the next couple. Number 3, misleading titles. So just by calling a graph something very specific, you're already trying to influence bias and creating like a, oh, this is happening. So by the time I actually even look at the graph, I've already got that slant kind of planted in my head. Okay, so we're looking at page 4. Follow along. Okay. Then we've got numbers that don't make sense. Okay, it's kind of messing with our points and maybe changing the order of things, not actually marking them accurately. And then finally, using pictographs, using pictures can also be a way that we manipulate things. So we've got lots of different ways that we can mess with data. So your job for today is to now try and pick out how are they influencing these graphs. So we're still looking at this whole pair deck piece. So going back, we're going to go through the same graph, but now we're going to look through the lens of, like, how are they messing with people? Because I can tell you right now, all of these graphs are bad in some way, shape, or form. So it's a matter of figuring out how are they trying to influence you.
Hey, what do I gotta do?
Yeah, you can draw all over it. It's not going to show up there, it just shows up on my screen. So that's what's nice about this whole pair deck thing, is that you can draw on it if you're given permission to do that. You can type on it, however you want to show your thinking. And no one else sees it but
What do I do?
so especially since this is like a new idea to us, I don't think it was fair to ask people to just call things out. problem. It is not 2014, but we're going to work with the debit. Let me see. Let's apply different ways. There's at least two. We've got the first. So for this one, a lot of people are hitting the nail on the head. The percentages really aren't changing all that much, right? Like this one looks like it's the same as this one, and they aren't. They're 81 and 82. The fact that 75% looks like it's a third of 82%. Like, not actually. Right? And even the title, more students are earning their high school diplomas than ever before. Great! Having that there with that visual tells me what I should be thinking. That misleading title. In actuality, if we made our scale kind of more accurate instead of zooming in, you can see maybe something like this. Right? Maybe it would look pretty much flat. There's only a difference of 6%. 7%. So what about this one? What's up with this one? You already pointed out that the percentages are a little wacky. First time you looked at it. Yeah, the number of people that are supporting to those people. like if they didn't put that number in, like that. Yeah. Yeah, we got percentages that look pretty darn similar. So it doesn't seem like it's maybe necessarily proportional. The fact that it's like one of those like tipped back 3D graphs even kind of maybe like makes the 70% like although it would be bigger, like maybe it's a little less emphasized because it's back. I can tell you this right now. These are all legitimate graphs that have been shared through different sources. Like they've been presented to the public or to a group of people as facts. So I just wanted to like bear that in mind as we're looking at these. I didn't make these. They're actually from different places. Yeah, percentages don't add up. So what should it add up to for a circle graph in terms of percentages? 100. Yeah. Yes. A little askew. I really don't even understand what you're supposed to like glean from this graph. Like, I don't understand what people have been trying to get you to think. I like this one. It's probably my second favorite next to the abortion. So, what's wrong with this? Oh,
Oh shit, a wall with a single pair can't be.
Pardon?
I was just talking to myself. Oh shit.
Okay, so like what's wrong with it? Like wrong house. Yeah, I totally agree. And then like 8.6 versus like 8.8, like what? Okay, I agree. I'm just looking for you to spot those little details. So I think the most like glaring error in this graph is 8.6. This is 9. This is 8.8. What?
It's not a deal.
Like, it's wrong. It's just wrong. Even the 9.2, like, it kind of looks closer to 9.5 than 9. Like, so these things are just kind of placed on the graph without paying much attention to the scale. The fact that we're missing a month kind of gives us this skewed perception of like what actually happened in December. Makes you think based on that 8.6 being shown high that probably December was even lower. So they just left it out so that we didn't see it. Right? So lots of ways that we're kind of messing with this. Okay, second last one. So I can tell you for this one because it's blocked off. So it looks like it's descending, right? COVID cases are going down. Hooray!
But
What's that? Okay, good. All right. So it looks like it's decreasing, but I can tell you right now, the dates were not in order on this graph. They specifically manipulated it to look like COVID cases were going down. So even though we don't have anything in the title to make us think that, the general organization of it is definitely slanted towards that. So they've messed with the order of date, which they're technically allowed to do. Bar graphs don't have a specific order you have to lay things out in. But most people think dates happen chronologically. So the fact that there's a May date here and an April date over here, I'm like, that's not so much. Also the fact that like they've got it stacking decreasing within each one, so each day is actually starting with a different color. So that also kind of like raises some red flags of like what's going on. Why are things changing the order so much? And the last one. What is wrong with this graph? Aside from everything. Can we get a little bit more? What is wrong with this graph? Aside from everything.
What even is this?
I agree. Alright, so for this last one, this last one actually was a legitimate graph that was presented to government in the United States. And the biggest problem with it, it's not so much the timeline at the bottom, they did
There's a timeline.
but the fact that it's just represented with a straight line, that's not actually truly realistic. So this is clearly just representing the general trend. But we're going from 290,000 to 330,000 for abortion. Okay? Keeping that in mind, this 290,000 for abortions lines up with 935,000 screenings and prevention measures for cancer. Not even close to the same number. And up here, we're dealing with 2 million versus 330,000. Not quite the same number. So if we were to put these on the same vertical scale, instead of messing around and having different scales, we would see that abortions are relatively plateaued, maybe increasing slightly, whereas cancer screening and prevention has decreased significantly. So the idea of using multiple vertical axes, there are times and places for that. So if I was wanting to graph like population of like wolves versus caribou, there are significantly fewer wolves than caribou. So if I'm looking to like match a trend on them in a specific ecosystem, I would put them on different vertical axes so that I could see their kind of overlap in general trends, how they kind of line up. But that's because I'm comparing two very different things. For this graph, I'm just counting people and the number of tests being done. So having two different axes is kind of a mess because it creates this very, very bleak picture where you're doing more abortions than cancer cure prevention. So, how are we feeling about being able to spot some misleading information related to graphs? Good? Got some practice. Okay, so for the remainder of class, we've got about 15-ish minutes based on that clock. What I would like you to do is on page 4 and 5 in your practice here, you've got 4 different graphs you want to go through, and I do some individual practice now of identifying how those graphs are misleading, if they are, using our list of different characteristics. And on your phone, really quickly before you do that, you just give me like a scale of 1 to 5. Where are you at? How are you feeling about this idea of misleading graphs and spotting how they be manipulated? Okay, so you just want to give me a quick rating. Ah, where'd you go?
Oh, it's on my phone.
Oh, okay. So you just want to give me a quick rating. Ah, where'd you go?
Oh, it's on my phone.
Oh. So just rate where you are at, like on a scale of 1 to 5.
Okay.
Just rate where you are at, like on a scale of 1 to 5. I know. It's a ridiculous graph.
What?
Right? I thought it was that I included that one for because I thought it was just silly. There can be a lot of things that you can point out about that graph. There can be a lot of things that you can point out about that. The fact that you're making that face is a good thing. What's wrong with these graphs and why might someone? So, what's your first thing?
You seen it? It's funny. Not really, just like get bored of you. Yeah, some random kid on Facebook. Just going off on random people.
Which? Why